Good morning, Devils fans. For those of you who weren't aware, Corey Pronman over at The Athletic has been releasing his 2023 NHL prospect pipeline rankings and has just been slowly making his way through every team in the NHL. Well, yesterday he finally got to the Devils, and we were ranked 4th behind number 3 Buffalo, 2 Chicago, and 1 Anaheim. Now, I personally have a little bit of issue there as well. I think we're arguably 1 and 2 with possibly Buffalo. I can see why Anaheim he has at 1. I personally would probably have them at 3 overall. But Chicago just feels very out of place there. Bedard seems to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And I don't think him alone, especially when we have Jack Hughes, is enough to put them 2 spots ahead of us, even given some of the other young guys they do have. I just don't think their caliber goes as deep as ours does. So, yeah, got a little bit of the issue there, but instead, today's episode is going to mostly focus on the internal rankings of the Devils themselves. Not just the order, but just the grades that he gave each player. So just as a quick overview, basically he would rank most guys in a few different categories, namely skating, puck skills, hockey sense, compete, and shot. You would have below NHL average, above NHL average, high end, and elite. And then also players would be put into tiers as a whole as well. Generational franchise, elite, bubble elite, all-star, NHL average, middle 6, bubble top, bottom 6, etc., etc. Stuff like that. You get the idea. Most of this video is going to pertain to the guys at the top of the list. I'll touch on a few of the guys as we go through, but really, obviously, I'm going to mostly focus on the guys that are actually going to be playing. So players that were eligible for this is anyone of the age 22 or younger, regardless of how many NHL games they have or have not played. So Jack Hughes is obviously still included in that, and he is our number 1 ranked prospect, obviously. So I have no issues there, but where I do have issues is some of the grades that he gave Jack in those different categories. Namely, at number 1 coming in is skating. He put Jack at high end. I don't know how of almost any player in the NHL you do not give an elite score in skating to, except Jack Hughes, and say probably McDavid, Barzal, McKinnon, just because of his unique style there. A couple of, a handful of other guys. Bratt maybe could put himself in that argument as well. But, I mean, Jack Hughes should be the obvious answer when it comes to elite skating. So putting him at high end there only just seems to me like, I don't know, you watch the one clip of him tripping over the blue line and we're like, well, that's that. Can't give him elite there. So definitely a bit of issue there. Puck skills, high end. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to say you're saving the truly elite for guys like McDavid and the like, I could see Jack possibly staying in high end. He's not the most elite puck skill guy. So, maybe right at that border there, but I can see the argument. Hockey sense, high end. Again, I think there's a very good argument here for Jack to be elite. He just sets up any play from the back of his head. I mean, we've seen countless where he just finds guys everywhere on the ice without even looking. And even on the defensive end, it is his hockey sense that allows him to play defensively as well as he does, as far as his positioning and finding that good part of the ice. Compete. Again, I have a bit of an issue here. Above NHL average, I would put him at high end here. I mean, he's not throwing the body, going into the boards or anything like that, but we saw it in playoffs that he does do those things, and even in the regular season, he has the longest NHL shift in NHL history. If that's not compete, I don't really know what is. And then shot. Above NHL average, this one I'm okay with. I know he scored over 40 last year, but really he's a volume shooter. It's not like his shot alone is anything super, elite or even high end. He's really a volume guy with an above NHL average shot, and he can definitely pick corners at times. He has his spots where I would say he will thread the needle in particular spots of the net that would feel high end, but on the whole, above NHL average does feel about right there. Jack was placed into the elite NHL player tier. I can see that. Based on the gradings he gave at the individual levels, I don't know how he ended up giving Jack elite, even if I agree that the overall tier there is probably right. If you're saving the, highest end tiers for, say, basically McDavid on his own, it makes sense to me. Coming in at 2 was Luke Hughes. Brothers back-to-back there. He's got Luke in the Bubble Elite and NHL All-Star tier. For a guy that's only played a couple games, even if they were electrifying, I'm not going to argue too much on those. I think Luke can absolutely put himself in Elite, so Bubble Elite makes a ton of sense. Skating, high end. I think he's going to end up Elite there, along with his brother, but until he actually does it at the NHL level, I think high end is a completely acceptable grade there. Puck skills, above NHL average. Sure, I think he's actually improved a ton, but if you're going on the whole of his past few years working his way up, I can see that. Hard to argue again for high end in that category. For Luke, I don't think that's where the best part of his game comes from, but I think he is on the pathway of working his way into that tier. Hockey sense, NHL average. Here, I'll disagree. I think he should be one spot up at above NHL average. We saw it in just his couple of games in the NHL where his defensive positioning off the puck was phenomenal and even saved a couple goals, I think, basically all on his own. And if you're only going by a couple NHL sample size, it was above average there for sure, basically across the board in every minute he played. Compete above NHL average? Sure, not too much of an argument. It's hard to say that without seeing a full season of work in the NHL from him. So even just giving him above there, even if you gave him NHL average there, I probably wouldn't give too much of an argument. Hasn't played a ton, so not going to give him too much comeuppance there. And finally, shot above NHL average. I'm good with that as well. I mean, he has a solid shot. It is not elite, so high end. I don't necessarily would call it high end either, at least from what I've seen so far. So above NHL average does feel right there. So again, not too much issues there on Luke. Jack was definitely had a lot to complain about. But coming in at 3 makes a lot of sense. We've got Dawson Mercer. He is a top of the lineup player as far as this tier goes. I think that's about right. Mercer really isn't going to be elite in any of these categories, nor is he ranked as in that as well. Again, it's really just the whole of his game, the 200 foot, and I'll just kind of jump to the bottom here. He is ranked at a high-end compete, and I think that's really what makes Mercer as good as he is in a top 6 type role. So I think he really nailed it there. Skating below NHL average, I can see the argument. I probably, maybe a bit of bias, would put him at just NHL average on the whole. I don't think he has a stride that is hampering him. I don't think he is blowing guys away with his foot speed or skills, which is why, on the whole, I think he's, it's just an average skater. I don't think there's too many knocks that I've seen in his stride that would mark him below that. Pronman thinks to think so, but, again, I disagree with him on a lot of these rankings, so that's just how it's going to be. Puck skills above NHL average. Definitely agree there. He's very strong on the boards and in front of the net. Is he high end? Not that I've seen yet. I think he can work his way to that spot, but above NHL average feels about right. And hockey sense, NHL average. Again, I'm okay with it. I think, again, in his young age, I think he could end up bumping himself up a tier there. We've seen him being able to just find that open ice, even with the puck on his stick, and get his way into those dirty areas to score. And there is a hockey sense to that, not just offloading the puck, but keeping it on your stick and knowing where to go and how to use it. So he seems a bit better than your average NHL player in that area. But if you want to hedge a bit, I can see that ranking. Number 4, next obvious choice is going to be Simon Nemec. He's got bubble top, middle of the lineup player there. I'm going to disagree. I think he is going to for sure be a top of the lineup top player. Now, I'm not saying he's a number 1 D, but when you say middle of the lineup, to me, that is saying this is more of a 3-4. Bubble top makes him maybe a 2, where I think he's probably securely a 2 and bubble middle, if that makes any sense. Now, I don't know if that's, I don't think he had that option in his rankings, which is maybe why he went here. So if that's the case, okay, I can see the argument. Skating, NHL average, yeah, no, I'm okay with that. I don't think Nemec gets away with his skating. He's fine with it. It's nothing crazy. Puck skills, average, sure, I can absolutely give him that. Hockey sense, above NHL average. This is where I might actually bump Nemec up to a higher end type player. I think it's his hockey sense that allows him to be as good as he is. But no NHL games actually under his belt. He does have a pretty stellar record down in Utica that you can go off of, and then obviously his wealth of experience over in Slovakia. So that's just my sense on it. Me and Pronman are going to disagree a lot, as we've seen. And finally, compete above NHL average. This one I would for sure put in high end. I kind of covered it in my video on him yesterday. Compete is all this guy does. And I think one season into this, it's going to be very obvious that he is at minimum high end in that category. Next up, we got Alexander Holtz. Again, we have a very deep prospect pool here. We are just rattling off some pretty high end names. He has middle of the lineup for Holtz. Given his NHL stretches that he has had, hard to argue against that. Personally, I would put him at bubble top, middle of the lineup. He still has the raw talent and skills to put himself there, but given the sample size we have seen in the NHL itself, even if he was amazing down in Utica, I'm not going to rip him too much on this one. Skating below NHL average, I talked about in the Holtz video. I actually disagree. I think the skating is actually fairly NHL average. I know that's his skating that gives him a lot of knock, but I'm going to jump to another one. He gave NHL average for hockey sense. This is where I'm actually going to say you could argue below here, only because I think it's the off the puck, especially in the defensive zone, where Holtz is really struggling to find that NHL game. Now, if you want to say hockey sense as far as passing and creating offensive plays, then he's above. So if you grade those out, he's above hockey sense offensively, below off the puck and defensively, so it averages out to average. Maybe you could see the argument there, but I would actually hedge on the side of below just because I think it hampers his game that much on the defensive end, and that's why he's struggling, not the skating. Puck skills, above average, absolutely agree. For sure, I would even put the passing and stuff in there, so no arguments. And then compete below NHL average, I'm going to disagree. I think the guy muscles his way across the ice every shift from what I have seen down in Utica. He will get in deep. He will play along the boards. It's not his forte. It's not the style that he necessarily plays. But when needed and asked for, he can do it. And finally, shot, high end. Definitely going to agree there. I could even see you saying he has an elite shot. He just needs to actually consistently do it at the NHL level, and I think he would solidly put himself in that category. Now I'm going to get into just kind of skipping around a bit. There was one name I two names. One name heavily disagree with, another one a little bit. But the next name on the list was Josh Philman. He has him at middle of the lineup. He has NHL average across the board, except with an above NHL average shot. I mean, sure. I don't know necessarily that Philman is gung-ho to make the NHL based on the scores that he was given here. I think he does still have a bit to work on, particularly in the hockey sense category. But we'll see. I have a lot of high hopes for him. I spoke about him in our prospect tournament. But I really want to get to some of the names that are below him, especially the next two. And that's going to be, next up, Nolan Foote. Middle of the lineup guy, sure. Below NHL average skating. It's not the most efficient stride. He is a big dude. So if you want to knock him for not having the best stride as a big man, okay. But I think for his size, he's pretty average for a guy of his, of his size. Puck skills, average. Hockey sense, compete, average. Shot, above average. Those all pretty track for me. These borderline NHL guys are a lot easier to grade out, I think. But even then, I think Nolan Foote needs to still push his way in here. I think if he can bring all of this to the table, he is going to fit in very nicely on that fourth line like I've previously discussed. Next up is a guy I haven't talked about because, I'm just not sure he's going to make it over, and that's going to be Arseny Gritsuk. He is labeled out as a middle of the lineup guy. We've got above average skating, NHL average puck, hockey sense, and compete, and then a high-end shot. That's all pretty right. Really the only knock for Gritsuk is going to be, does he make it over here after his deal over in the KHL? And I think if he does, we have a really strong, for us, he's going to be a bottom of the lineup guy, but middle six type talent. And I think while he is on the smaller side, he will fit into the system very well, obviously just given the other wealth of talent that we bring in here and the type of game that we play. I would actually have Gritsuk, if you were just ranking these purely on talent, probably coming in at 6, right behind Holtz, if not even possibly 5, just above Holtz. So below Philman and Foot, I really just think is a KHL bias. But now on to the next name. Crazy that he's here over the next guy on the list. That's going to be Daniil Karpovich. He is projected to play NHL games. Skating NHL average, puck below, hockey sense average, compete above, shot above. I'll be honest, I don't have a ton of footage that I have watched on Karpovich, so I can't really knock too many things here. My real knock is actually, oh my god, what the guy I have issues with wasn't even next. Next was Lenny Hamiaho. Projected to play NHL games, skating average, puck skills average, hockey sense average, compete average, shot above average. We watched him at the prospect tournament. I know my Devil's Advocate, JP, thinks his skating is below, but given what I saw from the prospect tournament and in international play since, I think his skating is average. And I think if Aminahu is able to pull all these skills together, puck skills, hockey sense, compete, shot I would probably just call average. I don't think he has an above NHL average shot. I really think his hockey sense, if any of these skills, is the one that's above average. But if he can really just pull this all together, I think we got a really good player for a depth piece going forward. Now for the big name on this list that I take issue with, and that is Seamus Casey. Coming in at 11, behind all the names, obviously. Projected tier is he will play games. Skating above average, puck skills average, hockey sense above, compete average, no ranking on his shot, which is crazy because he's a fairly offensive defenseman. I think he actually has a NHL average shot, which is really good for a defenseman. You bring in all these other skills. Again, the skating and the hockey sense are phenomenal. Probably the only reason they're knocking him is because he's 5'9", and yeah, we've seen other smaller D-men in the league. I even think Casey could bump himself up to a depth type winger position in the NHL. He has the offensive toolkit to do it. So just the fact that you think he's going to play games and isn't, I think he's a bona fide NHLer. That's really my issue here. I would put him probably above Haminaho, behind Gritsuk and Holtz, and probably behind Foot, just given where they're at now, but I think Casey could have the higher ceiling compared to Foot as well. From there, the list kind of just gets into, deeper. The last guy he has ranked for actual potential projected to play plays is Zakar Badakov. Sure, I haven't watched anything on him. Below NHL average skating, puck skills, NHL average sense, and above compete. I haven't watched much footage, if any, on this guy, so I'll just take Pronman's word here for it. Even if I disagree with him on almost everybody else, it is what it is. Then there's a bunch of other names listed on absolute borderline guys. Not going to take the time to get into this video. If you are interested in actually reading the blurbs, full breakdowns on all of these guys and the other ones I haven't discussed, definitely check out The Athletic. For Devils fans, is it actually worth the money each month? But if you can get a way to view this without paying, hey, good for you. But definitely check it out. Stuff like this is just great discussion pieces and good content, especially in these dry days of summer. But yeah, let me know what you guys think overall about the rankings here, whether it's where the Devils are at on the whole, or these individual rankings worth our players as well. That is going to do it for today. It is Friday. We are going to be heading into the weekend, so I hope you all have a great time with that. I will see you tomorrow morning as always, and forever, let's go Devils.